You'll love iBid on Storage. If you love garage sales and flea markets, you'll love iBid on Storage. If you're a fan of online auctions, you'll love iBid on Storage. What is iBid on Storage? When self-storage units are abandoned, the contents are auctioned online. You might unearth antiques, collectibles, rare coins or white goods. For your chance to bag a bargain, search iBid on Storage today.
iBid on Storage, the greatest website ever. There's like a motorbike on the front page. They've got their current auctions. Check it out. It's absolutely amazing. Dangerous, but absolutely amazing if you love a bargain. Let's take a look at the past, the present, and the future. There are so many amazing individuals in our industry that we can all learn from, and they're so forthcoming with their information, their knowledge, and what they've learned on their particular journeys. We're going to go for a bit of a reflective conversation covering a stellar and extensive career in this industry we love, in self-storage. It is the founder of Storage King and the CEO of the SSAA. Gold Coast, make some noise. Michael Tate and Michaela French Castelli.
It's always a longer walk than what you think, isn't it?
Thank you, Luke.
Good afternoon, everybody. Hope you are ready for some self-storage wisdom.
Is that what you call it? Okay.
This man, of course, needs no introduction, so let's take it back to the very beginning. If memory serves me correctly, it was over a beer with Jim Miller in the 90s when you first learnt about self-storage.
I did, yeah. Jim Miller, a real pioneer of the self-storage industry, along with Neville Kennard, Sam's dad. In those days, had started up the industry. We're talking early 90s. They'd started up the industry based on what they saw on the US a little. And I got a phone call to meet this fellow called Jim Miller. I was working at Lend-Lease at the time, shopping centre management of all things. And I met him for a beer downstairs at Ryan's Bar there in Australia Square. Those from Sydney will know where that is. And he said, "What do you think of storage?" I said, "What are you talking about? I got no idea." But I took up an opportunity with him, and it was a change in career because I'm a CPA, I'm an accountant by trade, and this was an opportunity to get into the sort of an emerging industry and the operations side, and the day-to-day trading side. So, I just took the punt.
And what a punt that turned out to be. When you saw that opportunity, or when was it really that you saw the opportunity? If you started in Miller's?
So that was, I think we did, I walked into Miller's self-storage. As I said, Kennards and Miller's were basically the only players. I think Neville had probably 9 or 10 stores, and Jim Miller had probably 12 or 13 stores, and there was a sprinkling of other independent operators. And as someone said recently, that was sort of the start of the association. The very first meeting was in 1990, so this was only a couple of years later. I walked in and I met a gentleman by the name of David Scanlon, who was just been appointed 2 weeks before me, and he was the general manager of finance, and I was the ops guy. And he came over to me and said, "Mate, we've got some work to do. This has just come through a recession and way overgeared. We need to get the trading levels up and the valuations up." And he showed me the balance sheet, and being an accountant, I wasn't overly impressed. So we had to get to work. But they were tough times because, interest rates at 16%, and I think they'd just grown a bit quickly, and we had to think of a way to lift trading from sort of occupancies of around 70% and get them moving. And he was Dave, my eventual business partner. He was out of PepsiCo and KFC, as it turns out. So he's in retail management, and I'd been in shopping centre retail. So we decided that was the way to go: get it away from property management and get it into retail management. Of course, in those days, and some in the audience will remember, and sort of like an American model where you had the they called them mum and pop in the US, but you had couples running storage facilities, essentially acting as property managers. as opposed to proper sales and marketing and retail. And essentially, normally the stereotypical role of the male was to look after the yard, so to speak, and the female was to look after the office. And but we came in and decided that the best way to go about this was to market it, train in sales, make it a product available to the general public as opposed to just a place to throw your stuff behind a curtain. So
Absolutely, and I think Mark said it best this morning when he said it's a retail business, folks, and I think you were one of the first here to really recognise that.
Well, it's at the end of the day, it's customer facing. And that was the strange thing coming into the industry. There wasn't a lot of focus on the customer. There was a lot of focus on how nice your roller shutters were, but which is quite strange. And coming out of a retail background, thankfully we were well versed in that. So we went about changing the balance sheet and the valuation to it to such an extent that he sold or was in the process of selling to an American group, and Dave and I decided, well, let's get out of here, let's go and start our own. This looks pretty good.
And what was it, I guess, that you initially set out to achieve with Dave? Did you know from the start that this was going to be as big?
Well, it's funny because at the time, a lot of retail was consolidating. Like you think of, and franchise style consolidation, you think of, and some people might know the brands, but 40 Winks Bedding, for instance. I remember going and seeing them, and Mitre 10, and these sort of franchise players who were trying to consolidate. Like in those days, in the 90s, it was sort of, you had, Richie Cunningham's Home Hardware or something, stores. You had a lot of independents, but nothing under one banner. And so Mitre 10 were doing it. 40 Winks were doing it with bedding. Porter's Liquor were doing it. So we went and saw these people and asked them questions and thought, why can't we do this in the self-storage industry? Because there was, in 1998, there was a lot of, well, not compared to the numbers Linda was showing, but there was a lot of independent operators around, and they weren't really representative. They're just competing against each other. So we decided to establish the brand Storage King as the independent owners brand, to join under one banner, and that was the pitch back in 98. And of course, it's in a fragmented marketplace, and it still is pretty fragmented. Consolidation in most retail industries looked like it was working, so that was the theory. Scale wins was the theory.
Played out pretty well, I would suggest. With reward, I guess, you usually have to take a few risks along the way, aside from the first one of jumping ship and starting up.
The biggest risk, starting up, my parents, we were very, we didn't have any capital. Like, you're talking about being 30 years of age, had nothing. I was a hopeless saver, for starters. I was good at spending.
As an accountant.
Yeah, as an accountant, hopeless. So we didn't have any money, so you can't go to the bank and say, we want to build a storage facility. Oh, how much is that going to be? Oh, it's $2 million for the land and $1 million for the build. And so how much are you going to put up? $20. Like, there's not much to give. So the model we decided on was a franchise model, and that was the biggest challenge, to actually sit in a room like this, slightly smaller, and invite independent operators along and say, I know you've got a good business there, but how about you change the name of that business to Storage King and come under our banner and pay us a fee, by the way, and we'll make life a lot better for you. You'll be able to act like a big operator and as a small operator. And some people took that on and some people didn't. Some people couldn't divorce themselves from the emotional side of leaving their name. Michaela's self-storage, I've got to call it Storage King Brisbane. Well, that was the deal. So, yeah, that was obviously, it was a risk, and because there wasn't a lot of money behind it, we only gave ourselves about 5 months of spending money to do it. So,
and at month 6?
At month 6,
what did that look like?
We actually got our very first licensee, Storage King Bondi Junction. It was in June of that year, and I think we'd started in early March. So It was about 3 months. I went and saw a few people in this room. Now I'm looking over at Richard over there. I think I went and saw him early on too. But yeah, it had to happen quickly, and we had to build scale quickly. So it was, yeah, there was risk involved, but there's been a lot of risk since, and everyone in this room understands risks. I think that particularly those who are operators and investors, and in what's involved, and a lot of the risks of development and obviously fill up and all those sort of things are part of it. But for us, it was reputational risk. You know, if we didn't succeed, or if we couldn't make money for people or influence the outcomes of their business, then we were stuffed, basically. Because we didn't bring any property along with it, or any balance sheet, or any, you know, banker that says, here's an intro to millions of dollars. It just had to work from a trading perspective.
Absolutely. There have been many chapters, I guess, to the Storage King story now, but some of the most defining moments, what stands out to you?
Well, I tell you, when you've got a vision like that, to consolidate the industry was essentially the vision. You need to rely on someone. You can't do that on your own. And it's great that there's two of you, because you can bounce off each other. And I'll be really clear about this. Dave Scanlon was the visionary about this. He changed, his mindset was to make this industry huge and us to be the leading player in it. I wasn't as visionary. I'm more a forecaster. I was looking at the next year. Let's just get the next year successful. But Dave was thinking 5 years down the track. But when you're in a situation like that and you haven't got much to offer apart from your IP, you're not bringing much to the table apart from a smile and putting on a couple of sandwiches and a beer. You need someone to back you. You need someone to come and say, Tate, I reckon you're onto something here. I'll back you. And that happened. So that was a key moment. Two gentlemen in particular, Shane Marshall and Phil Bannister, unequivocally said, Tatey, we're with you. And when you hear that, it's hugely emotional. You know, it's just all the work you've done and the ideas you've got, and someone's willing to back you just with their own, you know, and they didn't have a lot to lose, I suppose, in the scheme of things, because we weren't charging lots of fees, but just to hear that gives you a lot of inspiration. But there's been lots of milestones since, you know, even in 2005, because we were largely an independent owner-operators brand. In 2005, we were introduced to Abacus Property Group, a listed group. For the first time, we thought we've got a safety net here if we can get Abacus on board, being, you know, if an independent operator under the Storage King banner in those days wanted to sell and they left, let's say we built it up to 30 stores and they wanted to leave, they could just leave. And we've helped them generate the value, but they're gone off to someone else. Someone's just bought them, and that was sort of, we were pretty pissed off in that situation. So to go to Abacus and a gentleman by the name of Frank Wolf to back us and say, I'll tell you what, if you can bring a few of these, anyone who wants to sell to me, I'll buy them. And then so we were filling in the front door and building the brand in store numbers, but the concern was if they drop out the back, then we'll never go anywhere in terms of scale. So it was important to have a checkbook, a willing checkbook ready to take on those stores, and in which case we could grow them all right, but we didn't want to lose them. And so that was the option. There's been lots of milestones and, geez, fires, floods, growing years. I mean, I think about probably about the time National went to public, which was probably 2013 to about 2017, the industry was going, well, a bit like it is now with 250 stores coming on in the next 18 months. It was going like that, and we were opening a store every fortnight for a few years there. It was rampant. And I said, you know, Michael Alafaci in the audience here, who came on board in about 2005. We would get to the end of each week on a Friday at 6 o'clock and go, man, what a week. I don't know if I can keep this up. So it was pretty hectic, but so much fun. We enjoyed it, and then obviously to get to a point of sale in 2020, and then listing the brand last year on the stock exchange. I mean, Dave, rest his soul, would have been absolutely chuffed to see that.
Yeah.
So it's pretty cool.
Absolutely. So many successes. There must be a couple of decisions in there that you perhaps wished you might have made differently.
There are heaps, yeah.
Pick a couple.
Well,
you can't just talk about the good stuff.
No, that's true. There was some, look, and if you ask any franchisor in any retail business about some of the issues that they had, they'd be common to what we had. And that is, you've got troublesome franchisees or licensees on occasion in the early days. And a lot of the reason why many in the room, some that have been around for a while, wouldn't get into management agreements is for that very reason, because they've got to put up with some painful people, right? So there were a couple, especially in the early years, that really took us on and took the brand to the brink. And it's scary stuff, because remember, we had no asset. There was nothing. We had a slight cash flow based on fees, but there was no asset. Like you weren't going to walk away and put your kids through private school, so it was difficult, and dealing with some. I remember two in particular in the very early 2000s. Why we took those guys on, I still think. Anyway, so there was that. I mean, I went to Stockholm recently to the Fidessa conference, the association conference over there, and spoke there in Stockholm. And maybe one of the regrets I've got is you look at that market now in 2024, and I know Mike. I had a chat to Mike Burnham about he went into the UK some time ago, and we went into the UK for a short time. But I tell you, we were juggling balls through the GFC and trying to run Storage King UK and trying to run Storage King Australia and New Zealand, and we had young families, and there was just the two of us really that were doing most of the. So that was. In some ways, I regret selling it and getting out, because I look at 2024 and it looks like it's ripe for opportunity still to me. But I wish I was younger and had the energy to do that. But no. But there's always little operational things, mistakes you make in marketing and all that sort of stuff. But I think at the end of the day, there's no regrets. Always
learnings, never failures. Storage King is known for its incredible culture. It was something that I was inducted into only a few years ago, and I remember being astounded, because it was like nothing that I had ever seen in this sector. How did you cultivate that? Yeah, what does that mean to you, that culture?
Yeah, I mean, culture is such an overused word as well. It's every sporting team talks about it, every business talks about it. And culture's such a hard thing to define. It's a bit like they were trying to define innovation today. I think culture it obviously comes through the behaviour of people. I think that is a no-brainer. But how do you get people to behave in a way that's all in the same direction and pulling the same way and trying to achieve? I think the biggest thing I've learned would be that every individual in that group, and I'm not just talking about staff, but customers to an extent, licensees, investors, suppliers, some of the suppliers in the room here, have to be included. Like everyone's part of the story. And sort of that's the way it was built originally, as Storage King being the independent owner's brand, so to speak. The idea was everyone's got a story to bring to the table here, and everyone's got something to bring. And that culture never left. I think other companies don't, and quite rightly, don't allow as much freedom for their people as we did, particularly in the first 10 or 15 years. Autonomy to a store manager is massive. If you invest in them, they invest double in you and in the company they work for and the brand they follow. But to have them invest, you've got to take risk. You can't say, sort of like McDonald's, follow this script and ask for fries. Would you like fries with that now? And you've actually got to take some risk, and that risk can surface in terms of a bit of inconsistency between stores. But it's a risk that we were willing to take, and it means they're invested. And once someone's invested in anything emotionally, they'll run through that wall to get to the success that they're after. So I think that's an important thing. How you do it is, I think you've got to be really visible. I'm a huge fan. Like, I could have come to this conference here and just turned up today, but I like being visible, and that's the way business works, I think. Particularly in this digital age, I think, everyone's on the phones, but we still do conferences face to face. We're not doing this on Zoom. I think relationships, we're social beings, and being visible. I mean, that's why I'm a platinum frequent flyer, like Mike was talking about. I was very visible at all 200 stores all the time, and it's the family had to suffer a bit on the basis of that, but it was fantastic for the relationships, and I think that's how you build. They want to see the CEO on the shop floor, and I think a lot of businesses, if you ask the shop floor who's the CEO, they know the person's name, but they don't know them. And I think that's important. It gets tough when you get up to 200 stores, mind you.
Absolutely. We need no ivory towers in storage. Speaking of investing in people, I know many people, particularly in this room, would consider you a mentor. And over the past 30 years, I guess, who's mentored you? Who have you looked to for that significant influence or advice?
I don't like talking about mentors too much because I get emotional too easily. I think, I think there's inspiration and mentorship all around. Like, we'll go to the awards, I think it's in here tonight, right? There'll be someone who wins the Store Manager of the Year award, and that's inspiration. That's a mentor. Like, finding out their story, where they came from, what they did to do it, it's inspirational. And that's what mentorship's supposed to do. It's supposed to get you out of bed in the morning and give you some reason. Obviously my dad, my parents, but there's sporting analogies. I'm a sports tragic, as people who know me well, love the detail. I can't wait to see Mark on the next session, by the way, so we should wrap this up pretty soon. He's an absolute freak. The bloke coming on next is a freak. I know my surfing, I'm telling you, he's a freak. But there's mentors everywhere. I think, in sport, I read lots of sports mentor books, the Wayne Bennett's of this world, Craig Bellamy's, even guys like Pat Cummins, and, I think they're just, they're inspirational people, and you learn a bit about them, and you think, I could actually do a bit more of that. I could learn. Maybe I should back off there and not respond to that. And there's always ways, but I wouldn't say. I think Jim Miller in the early days, as one of the founders of the industry, was a great mentor. Now, and Sam will know from obviously his own dad, Jim was sort of like a bit of a father figure to Dave and myself, but he was a hard bastard, right? He was nasty hard. So in some ways you sort of learn how not to speak to people sometimes, but he was tough, and he made you tough. And so when things go wrong, you don't squeak out the back door. You take it on. You confront things. And I think confrontation is very difficult for people. I think, and he taught you to stand up for yourself. And if customers are always right, sometimes, but sometimes you've got to get rid of them too. Don't be friends with them. So there's lots of little lessons and lots of mentors that have influenced me, but I think everyone in the room should really appreciate that they're an individual and they've got their own ways, and not to be too swayed by others.
Absolutely. There's advice to take and advice to leave. There's plenty of new faces in the room today who this might be their first introduction to self-storage, or maybe they've sort of been in and around for a little while, but they're still getting started. What kind of qualities do you think someone is going to need to be successful in storage today? And are they the same as what they were 30 years ago? Or
A little. I think most people who have been in this industry for a while will understand this word, and that's patience. This is an investment you're not going to get paid back next year. You come back next year, you're probably still paying the bank. So it's a patient exercise. I think patience is important. But we used to talk about at Storage King the Tate principle, and I think that still applies, and we call that T was for tone, the way you speak with people and the way you engage. Attitudes was the A. That's you've got to have a professional attitude. As much as you want to muck up and have fun, that's great. But when business is on, it's focused. K was the knowledge. I think the more you can learn, and I'm still learning. I'm sitting there taking notes today and learning so much about the industry. I think the more you know about it, the more confident you are with customers. I think that's really important. Really study the industry. People, and I think Sam made the point today that people come in thinking it can't be that hard, can it? Just build a few sheds and see what happens. Well, those days it was about 1990, so that's changed. But the E is the biggest one in my view, and having empathy, and empathy for the customer. We talked about customer journeys today, and what's actually the customer thinking of this whole process? Do they think it's easy, it's hard, it's a pain in the backside? So understand, having empathy, putting yourself in the position of the customer, putting yourself in the position of your store manager, putting yourself in the position of investors who want to know what's going on, putting yourself... That empathy, in my opinion, is... in the modern age is in very short supply, unfortunately. And it's an easy throwaway line, I get that, but it actually does mean something to actually understand. And the people up here tonight that win awards, the people in the room should be thinking, I'd like to be up there, I'd like to be in those shoes up there. I think we're competitive people. I certainly am, very competitive person, and we want to achieve. And the three areas would be generally though is to concentrate on the areas of people. I think people is, with all due respect to those trade shows out there, anyone with a checkbook can go and buy the technology out there or buy the buildings and buy the real estate, but the critical difference is in any organisation. That doesn't just go for storage, but the fundamental sort of defining unique selling principle is your people. And if your people are, what we used to call them the three pillars, they're developing, so they're getting better. Your marketing manager's getting better, your store manager's getting better, your CEO's getting better. They're better skilled than they were a year ago. It's critical because people, if they get better at something, they love being involved. If you're just the same as you were last year, I haven't actually learned anything extra, or my skills haven't got any better, you're not going to perform to the same level. So there was development and experience, so what we call the employee experience. Everyone talks about the customer experience. Experience is a big word, just means are they having fun? Is it good? Is it a good place to be? And the last one is performance. I actually think people downplay their competitive spirit. I think there's a lot of people in this room who are actually pretty competitive. So performance means something. It should mean something too.
Absolutely.
Well, the scoreboard counts, right? How much money you're making, whoever you win, whatever your scoreboard is, that matters.
Speaking of scoreboards, look a little bit different today as well from a sector perspective. Some of those numbers yesterday are getting up there. Biggest challenges and opportunities for the sector over the next few years?
Yeah, this was talked about a lot at the recent Stockholm conference too. Obviously the advent of technology is, I think Nikki summed it up really nicely today. Technology, especially for us on the sort of tail end of our careers, should be embraced. It should be very much, as long as it's doing something better for your business, either back office, front office, customer experience, as long as it's doing something better, embrace it. I think it's a great tool. Some of the stuff out there is mind-boggling to me. But but to use that technology to embrace and to use it as a tool to help your people. I don't subscribe to the theory that it replaces people or decision making. I think even the AI session just recently, I thought it was an excellent session, how you could make up a program or a newsletter, but you can still read it and tweak it and make it, customise it. I think that's really important. Otherwise, people get lazy, and I think laziness breeds poor performance. So, yeah, I'd say embracing the technology. But also, I think Linda's point on Tuesday or Wednesday was about supply. I mean, people forget just before COVID, we were struggling a bit from a storage industry performance perspective. The scoreboard, it was hard to win. So don't just assume that the scoreboard's always going to look pretty favourable. You're going to have to be pretty heavy on your day-to-day principles and not taking your eye off the ball, that's for sure, especially in the next sort of 12 to 18 months, I would think.
Excellent advice, as always. So looking back across 30-ish years, what are you most proud of?
Oh, look, there's lots of stuff, The people are the big thing. I mean, it's why you do it, isn't it? Like, you make money, making money is good fun, and seeing your name scratched up that you used to scratch out and you see it on the top of a building is all well and good. But yeah, it's the stories, like there's some great stories, and there'd be some in this room that I don't know everyone in this room, but I'm sure, people who are coming into this industry, they either stumbled across it or they thought, bloody hell, how did I end up in the storage industry? But the stories you hear, and there's been some great ones in our group over the years where they've stumbled into it. I remember one of the store managers coming up to me, and I'm really proud of this, that she said how great it was. She was a housewife, flew out from the UK, had kids out here, and had been out of the workforce for 7 or 8 years or something, and just bored with life, not inspired, and then ended up as a store manager at one of our stores and just found their mojo, and it just inspired them to be competitive. It's inspired them to get out of bed and really try and achieve something. And I think like I said before, if you're developing as an individual in your own personality, your own skills, something magical happens. I think you just got a spring in the step. You just feel like, and I think that this industry can do that, certainly at Storage King, and that's what I'm proud of. There's so many stories. I ran into a guy, one of our old licensees at a golf game a couple of weeks ago, and I hadn't seen him in about 7 or 8 years, and he said, Tate, he was telling all his mates, this is the bloke that made me all this money, mate, and I'm going, well, it's good it's your shout then, mate, because all of those stuff, people pretty well everyone's had a pretty good experience, so I'm proud of that. Whether that experience means they had fun or they made money or they grew as an individual, as long as they did one of those 3 things is pretty cool.
Amazing. Ladies and gentlemen, you will not find a more genuine or humble king, so please join me in congratulating and thanking Michael Tate.
One more time, Michaela French-Castelli and Michael Tate.
Thank you.